Next on, I'd like to invite Henry Erskine Crum, the co-founder of Evently. Some say that he gets shy when asked to shoot a video. I doubt that because he's up here talking in front of the camera right now. So they're wrong. All we know is that he's a very passionate entrepreneur who loves working at the intersection of customer development, business development, and product. He's a graduate of the London School of Economics and the co-founder of Evently and Spoonfed Media, two startups which facilitate the marketing and discovery of amazing events in various cities.
Hi, everybody. So I am Henry. I'm the co-founder of Evently, which is a startup based in London, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. But where I wanted to start was like a little bit of a get to know you. There hasn't been much audience participation up to this moment, and you guys are all looking a bit shy, so I want to find out a bit about you. But before I ask you a couple of questions, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. So in my spare time, this is what I like doing. I grew up on a farm in the country in the west of England, and I like playing the ukulele and playing around in fields, herding alpaca, and actually, most importantly, hanging out with my family. I really enjoy that. That's my sisters in the top right, and that's my family in the bottom left. And then I also have a pretty amazing day job as well. So I get to work in tech. I love working in tech. And I'll tell you why. It's because it's full of the most inspirational people that you'll ever meet. I turn up every day to an office full of wonderful people. I get to come to events like this. I get to hear about how people want to change the world, and it's just phenomenally inspiring. So as a career path, I can't tell you how much of a good choice it is if you want to think about doing this. And now I just want to find out a couple of things about you. So who here who's an engineer here at the moment? Can we have some hands? Okay, awesome. And who here, that's a lot more actually than I was expecting. And who here already is working in a startup? Okay, and then who here is curious about working in a startup? Okay, cool, interesting. So when I was thinking about this talk and actually having to come after Andy, who was talking about how you shouldn't listen to advice, I thought about the medium in which I should talk today. And so I thought the best way to do it would be in the form of a story. And in the form of just telling you about some of my own experiences and some of the challenges that I've overcome that I feel could be relevant to people who are thinking about or in the early stages of running a business. And so, yeah, I'm going to tell a story. And what this story is going to be about is, and again, it's in relation to the conference, which is called Hack Cyprus, but I'm going to talk about hacking something else, which is understanding what product you're actually trying to build. And for me, this actually usually comes quite a long way before you even think about writing a line of code. And I think there's a challenge, an inherent challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is they come up with an idea, or they're incredibly perceptive and they spot a problem that other people have in a market, and they think about that idea and then they start building. And I think this poses a challenge because if we just, well, I'll just come on to this in a second. So what I'm actually going to talk about is hacking domain expertise. And what hacking domain expertise is, and understanding what domain expertise is understanding a market, okay? So if you have an issue or a problem that you have that you want to build for, or alternatively, if you perceive that there is a challenge that a business has, then you are looking at a market and you're going, there's a problem there. How do I solve that problem, and how do I go and build a business around it? And the real challenges, is that the problems that you perceive and that you have won't necessarily be the problems that a market has and the ones that they perceive. And actually the type of people that become entrepreneurs very often perceive things in very different ways to how the vast majority of a market look at it. So, sometimes you'll find that you perceive there to be a huge problem, but actually, if you go and ask the people inside the company, they don't perceive it to be a problem at all. And that's a real challenge. So what I'm going to talk about today is hacking domain expertise. So how do you get, especially if you're a young entrepreneur, how do you get information that people with decades of experience in a market have in a very short space of time to work out whether the problem that you have or the problem that you perceive is actually unanimous in the market, or it's just very specific to a small customer segment. And that's fine. You can still decide whether you want to build a product for it, but at least how do you go about being able to understand and make those decisions? And the reason why I think it's so important is because, you know, this is my firm belief that if you want to make great products, you need to elegantly solve really big needs, or you need to create new needs. And what I mean by that is, if you're trying to create an amazing product, it has actually got to genuinely solve somebody's problem in an incredibly elegant way. Or, you know, you may actually create a new need where people didn't even perceive they had one before, but again, you've got to be elegantly able to make people realize it. And so I'm going to start with a little prologue. And I would just want to take you to Exhibit A, which is the bell curve of awesomeness. And, you know, I just want to kind of show you through this bell curve, and actually, bell curve isn't the best way of showing this, but I just really like this bell curve. That actually, wherever you are as a human on this bell curve, and it can be a bell curve for anything, but just imagine that it is a market, and your perception, and you exist on a point on this bell curve, and the perception that you have is generated around what's going on around that. And the reality is that, you know, not everybody is going to be the same as you. And because not everybody is the same as you, that's what makes it incredibly difficult to be able to build products for an entire market, because your perception is very different from everybody else's. And I just want to give you a bit of context, because I think context is really important. So, you know, why did I look at hacking domain expertise in the first place? And that's really in relation to the business that I'm in, which is Evently. And the reason why we had to do this is because I've been building Evently for 24 months now. What Evently does is it provides event organizers, so mainly targeted at like big venues that have a lot of events, with software to do all of their online marketing. So we provide them with a software platform. It's a high price point SaaS product. And those guys use our product to do all their email, mobile, social media marketing, and content distribution. So we make it a lot easier for them to do marketing. And the interesting thing that we found, we've got about 400 customers today, is that you can lead a horse to water, but it won't necessarily mean they're going to drink. And what I mean by that is we made it incredibly easy for our customers to do online marketing, but that didn't necessarily mean they did better marketing. You know, and that's really where the value proposition of a company like Evently would come from. It's not about how much marketing you do, it's about whether it's better marketing, you're getting more people to your events. And what we found was that people who used our product didn't do better marketing. They just did quite a lot more bad marketing because we made it easier for them to do marketing. So, you know, we took a look at this problem and we said, okay, well, we've got a product here. There's demand for it. We're solving needs around kind of saving people time, but we're not actually solving a fundamental need like how do you sell more tickets? How do you get more people to your event? How do you increase your conversion metrics? And so we set up a crack team. And actually, you know, we set up a crack team of people earlier this year in the business, and we said, right, let's go and solve the problem of why people aren't using our product, or why aren't they learning to do better event marketing in the first place. And the reason why we did this is because we felt that, you know, our hypothesis was that people weren't using data to make better marketing decisions. And in this day and age, when you're doing online marketing, it's all about, you know, coming up with a hypothesis, testing that hypothesis, learning whether it worked or it failed, learning from it, optimizing your marketing channel. That is the focus of how you do online marketing. And actually, if you don't use data, doing online marketing is really, really challenging. So our hypothesis was that the industry don't know really how to use data. How do we help them to use data? And we went about this by, you know, we first of all, we asked a bunch of our current customers. We had another challenge, and our current customers were all in a very specific vertical. So we were like, how do we actually also expand out of entertainment into conferences and other types of events as well? So we needed very quickly to understand how event organizers could use data to do their marketing in the current verticals that we existed in and in new ones as well. So we sat down and we said, right, how are we going to do this? We don't have 2 years. You know, we don't have decades worth of experience in this industry. How do we go and hack domain knowledge and actually understand from the industry whether or not this is a problem that they perceive to exist anyway? And as I said, we set up a crack team. And the first thing that we did was look at the macro trends as well, because if the macro trends were flying in our face, then we thought, you know what, it's going to be really, really challenging. And so what we did is we looked at other industries. We looked at other industries at how they were using data. And we looked to see right at the top level, you know, were these guys, you know, I'm talking about the O2s of this world and the really big venues, were these guys and the Manchester City football clubs, were these guys using data to make decisions? And what we found is that they were starting to change the way that their teams looked. They were starting to employ people from financial backgrounds and data-driven marketing backgrounds into their own verticals. So that was a good view. And also consultancies were starting to pop up as well. I think consultancies is a really interesting data point on a macro trend where, you know, if people can't achieve something or have a need in an industry, usually consultancies come in the B2B space before software. And we were starting to see a lot of consultancies popping up in events industry across sport, conferences, entertainment. And also we looked at other verticals, and what we realized was that there are actually vertical-specific data businesses popping up in other verticals, my favorite of which was Duetto, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So, you know, we looked at this and said, right, is there a way that we can actually, you know, go around, hack domain knowledge and work out whether or not the events industry is ripe for a data-driven marketing product in the events industry? And that was really our big challenge. And, you know, going back and talking about consultancies, there's a really interesting model that I've certainly learned a lot from, and I've gone and spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs who have been through this cycle. And the most interesting one, I think, is Duetto. It seems to me that one of the ways of producing great products these days, and this is really, you know, giving you some context, in the B2B space, is around producing a consultancy or being a consultancy, learning the repetitive things that you have to do for every single customer, and then turning those into products. And a really good example of this is Duetto, which does hotel pricing in Los Angeles, and it's a really, really cool startup. But before they actually turned it into a product and they got a product team involved, they were a consultancy for 3 years. So when Patrick Bosworth, who's their founder, came over to the UK, I hooked up with him and we spent half a day together just talking about the process of being a consultancy and then going through from being a consultancy into actually, you know, he hired the ex-CTO from Salesforce, being able to get this great talent in and build a product business out of it. And Patrick made some really amazing, or told me some really amazing things, but the main one was that they never conscientiously went out to build a product. And, you know, actually a lot of consultancies who end up building great products never conscientiously do go through this process in order to build a product. So there's this 3-year period where they're learning the ins and outs of the industry, getting this domain knowledge. They are, you know, understanding and doing work for all their clients and working out where these kind of repetitive needs and bits of work that you do exist. And then it's a really easy decision to say, well, look, every single client has this problem. We solve it in the same way every single time. Why don't we just turn this into a product? And that's exactly what they did. And as I said, they got really good funders, they got a really good team, and I think they're going to do a really great job. But it got us thinking, and we've, you know, been working with Patrick on this idea ever since, was like, well, how do you just hack the consultancy bit? How do you stop the need to take, you know, how do you eradicate the need to take 3 years of your life to be a consultant, to get the knowledge of those similar patterns that you do for every single consultant? How do you do that in 3 months? And so what we talked to Patrick about was the idea of conscientiously consulting to create product. How do you go through a hyper speed phase of conscientiously consulting to prove a great product? And so sat down, you know, drunk a lot of coffee, spend a couple of weekends like figuring out a plan. So chapter 3 is the plan. How are we going to do this? How are we going to go and, you know, discover needs that usually take 3 years and 3 months? And so we kind of reverse engineered the consultancy bit, which looked a bit like this. And, you know, it's obvious, but it may seem obvious, but I'll explain actually how we did it in a second. So we had a phase plan. We wanted to take a really scientific approach to it. So every single phase, we had 5 phases around need discovery, customer segmenting and profiling, doing product validation on a specific segment of customers, doing commercial validation of that product on those customers, and then working out potentially how we could go into new segments. And we had a very specific plan around having success gates and fail gates between every phase. We had a set of knowns and unknowns. We had assumptions around how we might actually, the assumptions that we needed to prove or disprove before getting there, and then the methods and metrics. I think a really critical point on this, though, was, the reality is, in order to go and work out how to get all of that knowledge in a short space of time, what we had to do was be able to talk to the people who had the knowledge at that moment in time. Because if you think about a consultancy, where they get their knowledge from is working with 20, 30 clients over 3 years. So how do you get that as quickly as possible? We needed to work out a way to fast track the ability to go and speak to 30 or 50 between 30 and 50 kind of movers and shakers in an industry to actually be able to understand what their core needs were, and then whether there was convergence over the needs or divergence. And so the team was critical. And what we worked out is that we needed somebody who could just bang down doors and just like really kind of, get shit done. They were pushy, they would just really work email, they'd work the phones, they'd get the right meetings with the right CEOs, CMOs, and they would hustle like crazy. And then you need the other person to come in who's the researcher. I don't think you need to either be called a hustler or a researcher on this. I think it's actually more important that you have the right characteristics to be able to do these things. And I've just written them down there, and I think that there's a guy called Ian Hogarth who did a startup called Songkick, who wrote a great article about hustling, one of my favorite articles, that talks about the characteristics of what you need in order to be pushy and get shit done. And the characteristics of the researcher they need to be diligent, they need to be curious. Because actually, if you're going to go through a process where you're trying to learn a lot of information, and you're trying to go through a scientific process, you need people who are unbelievably organized. You need people, you need people who are disciplined, who can be rigorous. Because that's what it takes. A process like this takes discipline, process, and rigor. And then we get into the execution. So phase one was all about discovering needs. So, our target aim was, how do we speak to 40 customers? We need to speak to 40 people, and we need to make sure that every single one of those conversations is worth it. And actually, if you think about it, if you're spending up to, if you're having 40 conversations with people who really know what they're talking about, movers and shakers in an industry, and you're spending an hour to 2 hours with them at a time with follow-up, you learn a hell of a lot. You learn all that you need if you're asking the right questions in the right way and learning at each phase to be able to build a really good clustering and understanding of what the needs of the market are. And the way that we did this is actually, and the way we did our lead sourcing was through LinkedIn. In retrospect, I wish that we had used the LinkedIn API and just hacked on that. But actually what we did, which was even more lo-fi, is we just used LinkedIn search. We all got premium accounts. And we started targeting CMOs, CEOs, and kind of chief sales officers from really big events businesses. So in conferences, we go after DMG events and Tarsus and Montgomery's. In sport, we go after Man City and Arsenal and Goodwood Racecourse and Ascot Racecourse. In live music, we go after Live Nation. So really just speaking to the big guys who had really good understandings of what was going on in the market. And what we did was we sent out hundreds of emails to start off with. We A/B tested everything. So, we tested 11 emails in the end and optimized them. The worst one had a 2% conversion. The best one had a 23% conversion. That's an enormous difference when you're trying to speak to the right people. So, thinking about how we, hacked domain expertise, part of it was about really thinking about every step and treating it like a marketing conversion funnel yourself. So how do you, the end point is getting the conversations. The starting point for us was we need to speak to the right people. We then worked out that when we actually got them on the phone for kind of a 15-minute qualifying call, we managed to convert about 80% of those into a meeting. And then pretty much everybody who we had a phone call with would have a meeting with us. And the meeting was the most important thing because that's when we really go into the needs analysis. And for people in the UK, we met face-to-face. For people in the US, we did it on Skype video conferencing call. when we actually got to the meetings, what we did was we went through these, we called it an investigation protocol. And the whole idea was an investigation protocol was to make sure that we were asking every single candidate the same set of questions. Because at the end of every week, we needed to come back and analyze all the data that we had. And if we were asking different questions to different people, it would have actually been really hard to analyze where these clustering of needs were. So the investigation protocol was absolutely critical in terms of really delving into the questions about understanding their need for data, their understanding of data, their understanding of marketing. Absolutely important. It's so important to us that we got that right. And then the second phase, well, the first phase actually, the success metric was actually just how many conversations have we had with people in the industry. So we wanted to have 40 conversations, and we got to about 44 in the end. I think about 10 of them were in the US, the rest of them were in the UK. And the next one was sitting down and just looking at all this data that we got. So, you know, we had about 50 or 60 hours worth of recorded calls. We had lots of notes. We had analyzed all this data in spreadsheets. And, you know, what the next phase was, and we did this on a weekly basis, was we'd all sit down on the table and we'd argue it out. You know, what was our interpretation of the data? What was the interpretation of the results? Where were we seeing convergence of needs and clustering existing? And where did we as a group have consensus versus where are we arguing? Because we need to all come, you know, end up on a consensual way for this to actually, for our feeling for this to work. And where we ended up at the end of this was kind of a group of clustering of needs. So we saw the events industry as a whole, and we realized that there was this group of people that had these needs solving, and this group of people that had these needs solving. And we actually looked at the events market and we said, you know what? The best way to segment this is not by looking at what size revenue they do or anything like that. The best way of actually segmenting a market is the needs in which they have. So, and that gave us the ability to then go and build proxies for those kind of clusters to say, well, is there actually a market there? How much are those guys making? And then we went into product validation. The product validation was critical for us. It was actually our aim to, you know, really not to actually even write a line of code in this. We wanted to actually work out if we could make money and build products without actually having to write a line of code. So we spent most of our time in Excel and PowerPoint. And we're actually still going through this product validation phase at the moment. So, you know, I'll share the results with you when we get to the end. But the one thing that we did when we got to the end of the profiling phase and we said, right, we're going to go after this segment, is we set up the concept of a charter customer program. And the concept of a charter customer program is, you know, you're going to a customer, you don't have a product yet. But what you do is you actually you get them into a legally binding contract that says, we're going to solve this problem for you. You're going to pay us money when we've solved this problem for you, and you're going to give us feedback whenever we want it, whenever we come to you with an idea of how to solve this problem. So we've got 5 people on the Charter Customer Program, and you know, they've actually all started, now they've started paying us for the work that we did. Actually, they did it very, very quickly when we started analyzing their data and say, look, you could do your marketing better like this. Or you can think about your cost optimization in this way. So we started to actually get all their data sets, build products for them in Excel, and then hand it back to them in PowerPoint. And this was kind of a really fast way of just testing whether or not the problem that we were looking to solve had any sort of commercialization on it that we would be happy with in order to go and take this through to looking at building a product. And you know, so this was the last part of it: charter customers, hypothesize on the problems, and then build out MVPs, not in code, but in PowerPoint and Excel. And what I've hoped that, you know, I'm just going to come on to a summary, but what I've hoped that this kind of example or story of the problem that we're trying to solve and how we did it has given you, you know, what I really hope is just that it has sparked a few thoughts in the way that you're approaching problems at the moment. Because I think it's really important that when you do listen to how other people listen to people at on stages like this, like the most important thing is just to pick up from their experience, and as Andy said, understand the context and see if you can just drag a little bit of that into what you're doing, because that's the most important thing. All of these talks are just about really, in my view, kind of trying to just resonate with a thought that you've had in a problem that you're trying to solve, probably in the moment. So this is what I learned from the process. In the event space, we definitely managed to hack domain expertise, and in about 3 months, we got a really good understanding of all of the needs of the industry. It's, you know, I'm not sure whether or not, just to speak candidly, whether or not there's a software product around data to do that yet. That's still out, that still remains to be seen. But we were definitely able to understand where the needs were. The next one is that the process took so much discipline and rigor. You know, working out how to manage 5 one-hour meetings a week, making sure that those happen, getting everybody to analyze it, making sure that the quality of the investigation protocol when you were talking to people was adhered to. It's a really, really rigorous discipline process. It's not sexy. It takes a lot of understanding. The other thing I learned is that people just love to talk. Even the CEOs, CMOs, chief sales officers, you know, things like that. You hit them up with the right email, and those guys just, and you make them feel a little bit special. You know, one of the things that you can do when you're running a process like this is you can drag a little bit of information over here and give it to another person over here, and people love that. And what we found is that when you got talking to people about their problems, even the CEOs of companies that you would perceive have no time whatsoever are happy to spend an hour to an hour and a half talking about their problems with you. And then approach is everything. So for us, like, the difference between 2% conversion and 23% conversion on email could mean that we were still writing emails till next Christmas. So being able to actually really understand approach, and, you know, at every single stage of the way of getting people through to email, to phone call, to meeting, to investigation protocol, it was really important to understand what were the levers that allowed us to get higher percentage conversions at each part of the funnel. And then, you know, the other thing is you've got to have people that are comfortable arguing with each other, because the whole point of, and feel, you know, and are in their comfort zone doing that, because the whole point of this is not that everybody sits down around the table and, you know, and goes, oh yes, that was lovely, we all agreed on this. No, not at all. You need people who, you know, express their opinions well in a communicative way, and that are happy to argue. And that's it. I hope that you found that useful. Thank you.